Folks, it's that time. Let's talk about yards per play. It's a big stat.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making the Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciated for you everydayers that join us for this content. Thank you very much. Mark Onweiler, if you would please let the folks know about FanDuel.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $500 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. One more time, that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
Thanks, Mark. I wanted to spend some of this episode going up and down the numbers. We kind of did two episodes, one looking at the offensive side for individual stats, defensive side for individual stats. But there are the accumulation of those stats tell us the story of 6 games into the season. And as we try to identify who the Huskers are and who they can be, the numbers will tell us some of those things. Now, it doesn't matter who they're playing because this is an accumulation. And the thing that you do against good teams and the thing that you do against bad teams generally meet in the middle to become your standard and what you're working from. There are numbers that mean important things to different teams. And for this Nebraska team, defensively, they've set a standard for what the numbers should mean. And then they're trying to set standards for what they want to do offensively. So I wanted to spend this episode going through some of those numbers, and you can circle in your mind some of those numbers that you think matter, and we'll go through them and where you think the Huskers are as well. First things in this, and I mentioned yards per play, and there's a lot to be said for what Nebraska has done to this point. One, the number of yards and number of plays. If I asked you whether Nebraska was negative in yardage, even in yardage, or plus yardage, what does your mind tell you about a 3-3 team? That they probably rank somewhere in that pretty balanced space. But here's some of the numbers, and there are a couple of things within this to pay attention to. That opponents have accumulated just under 1,200 yards against Nebraska's defense, just under 1,200 yards at 1192. If you wanted to compare what Nebraska has done offensively against its opponents, it has accumulated 1,437 yards. They're plus over 200 yards, almost 250 yards over its opponents. And that is a statement, as much as anything, is a statement of how well the defense is playing, because Nebraska has had the ball 253 plays on offense for 1,437 yards. That's an average of 5.7 per play. Nebraska's opponents have run 267 plays and have only accumulated 1,192 yards. That's 4.5 yards a play. Now, every program, every defensive coordinator, every offensive coordinator has an ideal of what those numbers should be for them. 1, based on system, 2, based on roster, 3, personnel, and then 4, game situations, because some situations you get up big and you need to pump the brakes, or you decide to pump the brakes. Sometimes you're playing from behind. But for 3-3 teams, that balance seems to happen naturally. Nebraska has scored 12 touchdowns on offense. and has only allowed 8. So when Matt Rhule speaks of this is a defensive team first, the numbers confirm that. And there's nothing wrong with the thinking when the numbers are at that depth. You have to pay attention to it. Now, there's a thing that stands out so loudly to me, that Nebraska defensively, if I asked you how many, again, 6 games, how many rushing yards has Nebraska allowed this season? 6 games. And considering that, I mean, Michigan, Minnesota, Colorado. What if I told you that Nebraska had only allowed 185 yards rushing this season? And we know that most of those came against Michigan. 185 yards. There were 300 yards gained, but with sacks and that's tackles for loss, that net is 185. Those are pretty substantial. And to give you a point of reference for it, Nebraska has accumulated 939 yards rushing in 6 games. They gained over 1,000, then, of course, with tackles for losses, etc. But 170 attempts for 1,067 yards, where opponents have 101 attempts for 311 yards. Those are crazy good numbers on either side of the ball. And this is what is giving some hope to the potential of Nebraska offensively and defensively, in that, Michigan, if you consider it the standard, that's one thing. You could also say, if that's what you chose to do, that Michigan was an outlier. Or you can say we think it kind of lands firmly in the middle. But if you're only averaging, giving up 46 yards a game rushing, you have an opportunity to be exceptional, especially in the Big Ten. Now, I'm not sure how consistent those numbers are with the Big Ten, but if you're talking about a full Big Ten season. But as they currently stand, and that's all we have to work from, is the knowledge of what we know versus what we think we know. That Nebraska's numbers at 45 yards a game, 46 yards a game, those are pretty exceptional numbers. And it gives greater credential and credibility to Tony White and this defense and what he's put together and how they're attacking things. Again, if you said they performed at a high level 4 of the 6 ball games that they played, at a high level for three quarters of Colorado, or 2.5 quarters of Colorado, and then what it was against Michigan, where you didn't really get done what you were trying to get done. But in the other 4 games, the numbers were pretty exceptional, and then it shows up in the average. And that's what we're trying to find out. We will go to break here, and we'll come back. We'll go a little bit deeper into the number. Those passing game numbers are very interesting and tells the story as well. We will tell that story when we come back to live. Hey, gang, welcome back. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. We want to thank the folks from LinkedIn. Mark Einweiler, let them know about LinkedIn.
Thank you, DP. This episode of Locked On Huskers is brought to you by LinkedIn. Now, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. And it's super easy to create a listing there on LinkedIn. You add your job, you add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. They've got simple tools like screening questions, making it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and hire. And it's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. DP, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. It is again, when you start playing with the numbers that exist after 6 games, and game situation, circumstance have a lot to do with it. So as a defensive coordinator, sometimes you have to take away a thing, and in taking away a thing, it may be the opposing team's best thing. And you may need to focus on it, and taking that away, forcing them to go to something they don't do as well, which has less residual effect on you. Sometimes you give up numbers in the passing game because you're gonna throw all your ducks at the run game, which is what Nebraska has done. They've allowed 3 touchdowns rushing so far in 101 carries, but those are fantastic numbers, like just truly fantastic numbers. And that Nebraska is holding opponents to under 2 yards an attempt. Under 2 yards per net attempt. That's phenomenal at 1.8. Those are crazy good numbers. Nebraska, just to put a reference, 170 attempts, over 1,000 yards at 5.5 yards per attempt. It tells you that Nebraska, while averaging 235 yards a game versus their opponent's 46, that is an advantage. Now, can you hold and maintain that advantage throughout a Big Ten season? That is the thing to be said, because Northwestern is coming, Maryland's coming, you'll face Michigan State, and then you'll run that gauntlet at the end of the season, including Wisconsin and Iowa. So, look, your ability to defend the run will certainly play out how this team ends its season. In the passing game, and again, just giving points of reference so we can speak to the exact numbers that exist now, rather than speculating that after 6 games, Nebraska has passed for 500 yards, give or take a few yards, 498. They are 44 of 83. They have 4 interceptions, 5 touchdowns. So 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 44 of 83 per attempt, 6 yards per attempt. And I give you all of those numbers to let you be able to firmly measure what they're doing versus what teams are letting them do or allowing them to do, and then what Nebraska's holding people to doing in the same space when they don't have the ball. 500 yards rushing passing for Nebraska, 1,000 yards, 1,007 yards on 166 attempts. Now twice the attempts. 100 yards, 100 attempts. 100 completions, 3 interceptions, 5 touchdowns against Nebraska. But they're holding teams to 6 yards an attempt. And those are equal and balanced numbers. So if you're dominant in the running game and you're meeting the standard in the passing game, you're doing something pretty exceptional. I mean, those are exceptional numbers that while Nebraska is only averaging 125 yards a game passing, and I'm concerned about that because I'm just not sure that's a number that's going to keep you above 500. It does mark this thing down for you to pay attention to, and that they're averaging giving up 250 yards a game passing. Some of that is being ahead against lesser talent. Some of that is affected by the fact that Michigan State stopped throwing the ball. They just ran the ball because they had a lead and they could. The numbers meet in the middle, and I just think that it's fair to point out. Both Nebraska and its opponents have 5 TDs passing, but Nebraska's done it in 86 attempts, where the opponents have done it in 166. So the numbers tell the story. Now, one of the big numbers for me, whether it was as a coach, commentator, to pay attention to whether a team has an identity, you need to be consistent in what you do. And here's the thing for me, and I just want to point this out, that Nebraska time of possession resonates with me, especially when you can't throw the ball. If folks know you're going to run the ball and you're still able to run the ball, you're doing something right. And that's, give shout out to the offensive line, for being able to do this, because you cannot have time of possession success like this and not get good work up front. So you're getting some good work up there. It may not be ideal, but you're getting some good work. Time of possession, Nebraska has held the ball for 20 minutes more than its opponent. Excuse me. And I think, to point out, to go into greater detail, that works, especially for 6 games, that you've consistently had the ball more than your opponent. Now, getting points from that would matter, and being able to get all, extend drives and allow this defense to excel. But on third down, Nebraska's 20 of 49. Its opponents are 24 of 62. At a clip of about 40%, which, okay, they're 50% on fourth down conversions, and everybody thinks immediately to Michigan because of what that was. But those numbers are fine. You're allowing 60% completion conversion on fourth down defensively, and a big, huge honking number that stands out to us. And Husker fans, prepare yourself. There's a trigger involved. That one of the differences between Nebraska being 4-2 and it being 3-3 is turnovers. It's turnovers. And I think most people would identify, and if I said, how many turnovers does Nebraska have? Nebraska has 10. Now, they've lost 5. Of the 10 fumbles, they've lost 5. Opponents have fumbled 5 times and only lost 1. That's a big deal in being able to create turnovers, to create physicality, get the ball on the turf, and then to actually convert that into Nebraska's given up. It's doing well in the sack game. That's not really the issue, but turnovers is such a big deal. It's such a big deal. If Nebraska can handle, and a part of the quarterback decision we know was built on, okay, can we reduce turnovers? That's a thing that we need to talk about. That's a thing that when you point out that Nebraska, even with only having lost 5, there are 10 times when Nebraska put the ball on the turf. That's too much, 6 games. Opponents have only done 5. That's 1 time per game where they put it on the turf, and they've only lost 1. It means they're getting the ball and they're not giving it back. We will go to break. When we come back, there are some other final numbers. I mean, we talk about first downs and those sorts of things, penalties and those are numbers that tell you they're difference makers, and they are the difference, along with turnovers, in determining whether you're an 8-win team or a 4-win team. We'll talk about those when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Hey gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers, and thank you for subscribing and following. Jump on social media. That's my handle for all social media. Most of you figure that out because you email me and inbox me on a regular basis. So thank you for what you do. Greatly appreciate you guys commenting on the content and giving me ideas about what you want me to talk about. Greatly appreciate it. I want to close with this. So we talked time of possession, turnovers, rushing yards, passing efficiency. All of those things are in play. Nebraska is plus in the first down numbers. It's an interesting factor that offensively, Nebraska, as you would imagine, with their offensive success, that 47 of their 76 first downs were on the ground. 25 of them passing. Defensively, Nebraska has only given up 18 first downs rushing, but 46 in the air. Penalties, it's a thing. Teams get penalized more than Nebraska does, almost double, as a matter of fact. So those are numbers that give me hope and keep me in place. And then we dive into the kicking game, which tells us another part of the story, and it's the thing that we need to have our eyes to. Nebraska is 1 of 3 on field goals. one of three. Leaving points on the board is a surefire way for a 500 team to sink below. You got to figure out how to get that done. Opponents have punted the ball more than Nebraska has. Again, getting off the field when you're able to do that, and yards per play certainly play into that. But opponents have made 6 of 7 field goals. Being plus 15 points in a 500 on a 500 team, you can't give up 15 points in field goals. You've got to, and you can't have that sort of efficiency level. It has to change. The punt game, they've been pretty exceptional. 42 yards a kick, almost 43 yards a kick versus 41 and a half. Opponents have punted more, so that's a thing that in play. And then Nebraska got a glimpse of when its kick return game pays off, and it shows up in the numbers, averaging over 23 yards a kick return. That's substantial. That's substantial. Nebraska is doing some things that show why they're a 500 team, but they're doing some things that also tell them why they're not a 4-2 team as well. Scoring, the numbers show up. Points off turnovers is an actual thing. Again, opponents have scored 26 points to Nebraska's 10 off turnovers. It's a big deal. It's just a big deal. A sign of improvement in the space is that Nebraska is actually doing well when it comes to penalties. Opponents have been penalized 28 times Nebraska's 24. I still think 4 is too many for this team and the style of play that they have, but that's just me. Don't get mad. I'm just delivering the news. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. We'll close with the 3 words we love so much. Go Big Red.